We'll get going, and I'd like to welcome everybody to this meeting of the Education, Skills and Scrutiny Committee. We're on the 21st of January, and we has no need to, because it's just been discussed, but I will make everyone involved aware that this meeting is being recorded to be viewed by the public later if they wish to do so. Can I also welcome members of the public and press to today's meeting? In addition, I'd like to welcome two Estin inspectors who are observing the meeting, and that's Gary Jones and Richard Thomas. Pleased to have you with us, and welcome our Cabinet Member for Finance to the meeting, who will be being informed by our discussions today for budget discussions moving forward.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for allowing me to attend today.
No problems. Can I remind you all to switch your phones to silent for the duration of the meeting, please? In addition, can I refer you to the protocols for the meeting, which we should all be aware of by now, but just to remind you, and they've been previously circulated, your microphone should be switched to mute unless you're speaking. Should you wish to ask a question or make a comment, can you please indicate via the chat function or by raising your hand, preferably your hand. I will rely on Charlotte to keep an eye on the chat function for me, because both at the same time can be difficult when you're chairing. So I'm assuming that everybody will have read the paperwork prior to the meeting, so that we won't need to go through in detail. Please, can I ask you only to use the chat function for raising a question or a technical issue, and keep it to that, please. When asking a question, can you indicate what page number, if there are papers associated, that you're referring to? The first item on the agenda is, as usual, the roll call. I am Councillor Sonia Reynolds, chairing this meeting, and I am present. I'll now call upon Charlotte, the Democratic Services Officer, to take the roll call.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I've marked you as present. So if I can go to Councillor Rydian Maisen.
Yeah, Charlotte, present.
Thank you. Councillor Matthew Crowley.
Present, Charlotte.
Anne Harris.
Present. Me.
Councillor Jane Jones.
Present, Charlotte.
Dennis Keogh. Sandra Miller.
Present, Charlotte.
Councillor Morgan.
Present all.
Councillor Rebecca Phillips, Chair. She's having difficulty entering the meeting, so she's listening through Jane Woodman Ralph's attendant. So I'll mark her as present.
She is present, yes.
Thank you. Councillor Mark Prothero.
Present, thanks, Charlotte.
Suzanne Renkes.
Present.
Councillor Anthony Richards. Chair, I have had notification that he might be late, so he might be joining on later on in the meeting.
Yep, he's also shared that with me.
Thank you. Councillor Dave Whiteblock.
Present, thank you, Charlotte.
Councillor Rob Wood.
Charlotte.
Present.
Councillor Joe Hale.
Present, Charlotte.
And co-opted members, Marie Caddick.
Present, Charlotte.
Roberto De Benedictis. Adam Moore.
Present.
I've had apologies from Linda Newman. And then cabinet members, Councillor Alan Lockyer. Peter Rees.
I'm here, Charlotte.
Thank you. And Councillor Carol Clement Williams.
Yes, Charlotte.
Thank you. And then if I move on to officers, Aled Evans.
Present.
Andrew Thomas.
Present.
Phyllis.
Present, thank you, Charlotte.
Levy. Mike Daly,
Present.
Paul Walker.
Present, Charlotte.
Thank you. Have I missed any officers at all, apart from Jane Woodman-Rolfe? Sorry, Jane. Thank you. Have I missed? Thanks. Have I missed anyone else at all? No. Chair, that's everyone that's participating in this meeting.
Thank you, Charlotte. In that case, can we move forward to declarations of interests, please? Anyone got anything to declare?
Councillor Phillips.
No, I haven't. Thank you, Jane.
I see none, so we'll move forward then. We have the minutes of the previous meetings. We have two sets, one short one from the annual meeting of council and the main meeting. Has anybody got any points to raise on the meeting prior to their approval? Thank you. Can I have a proposer for approval of the minutes, the first set of minutes, please? And a seconder?
I'll second, Chair.
Anybody against? That's approved. And for the minutes from the annual general meeting of council, a proposer?
Propose, Chair.
Seconder?
A second, Chair.
And I see no one indicating an issue or against, and that's approved. So we move through, therefore, to the verbal update on the impacts of COVID on the education department. I'm going to go to the director, to Aled Evans. I understand that Andrew Thomas and Chris Millis are with you and will feed into this. I suggest, unless you think differently, Mr. Evans, that we take questions at the end.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I would agree with that if everybody is in agreement. Yeah. Okay, if I could start then, and the main focus of the presentation will be on activities since January. However, if there are any issues or any questions that relate to the period in December, we're more than happy to reply to those if needed. As members will be aware, since the beginning of the academic term on January the 4th, remote learning has been in existence for all schools. However, our schools remain open. Our schools remain open for the children of critical workers and for vulnerable learners. And they're also delivering what is known as distance or remote learning, and whereby our pupils will be accessing their learning from home, and there will be follow-up activities in relation to that. I will be asking Chris Millis to give you more detail about the plans that we have in place to support and promote the home learning activity. And I'll also be asking Andrew to give you greater detail on the devices that we've provided families and also for our school-based staff. We have been looking and monitoring the attendance at schools, and since the beginning of term, we have seen that increase. In the first full week back, we had about 400 pupils actually physically attending schools. So those will be either vulnerable learners or children of critical workers. Yesterday, that attendance had increased to 1,000, which equates to 5% of the pupil population. Now, we are working with our schools to ensure that vulnerable learners in particular are encouraged to come into schools, and there is significant activity in relation to that. We do have a joint registry between ourselves and Children's Services, whereby we've identified what we would know as the most vulnerable learners, and certainly those who are open to social services. So we are actively promoting their attendance at schools because of known risk in relation to those families. If we then look at broader issues, we have yet to receive the revised operational guidance from Welsh Government regarding the opening of schools. However, we have, through verbal updates to schools, advised them in relation to two specific points. The first one is on social distancing. As you will be aware, schools up until the end of last term were operating on the basis that classroom activity didn't necessarily have to have social distancing for pupils. Whilst there was social distancing for staff and pupils, or between staff and pupils, pupils themselves could sit in classroom settings whereby that social distancing wasn't necessary. Since the beginning of this term, we have advised, particularly in light of the new variant, that their risk assessments are revised and that pupils should be, in the secondary sector in particular, adhering to social distancing within classroom settings. Also in relation to face coverings or face masks, likewise, we've advised schools, particularly secondary schools, to ensure that face coverings are used within classroom environments as well as within communal areas. Now, this is subject to local risk assessment, and it'll be subject also to some unique circumstances that may prevail in schools, particularly where a child may not be able to understand the principles of social distancing, particularly in our special schools, and also likewise for face coverings and face masks. However, the numbers, as I said, are fairly small at the moment, so that doesn't seem to be an issue. These arrangements will be revised or will be reviewed at the end of this month, and we will see the outcome of that. But the expectation is, at the moment, is that they will prevail until half term at least. And we are working with Welsh Government through ADU, the Association of Directors of Education in Wales. We are looking at working on phased arrangements from half term onwards. As far as our support services are concerned, they remain active and they are still supporting schools, mostly through remote activity, but all our services, so our inclusion services, our school improvement services, are remaining active. They are supporting schools in the delivery of education, and they are supporting schools to assess the needs of individual pupils where that is needed. I'm sure many of you will have caught the news that came yesterday regarding the examination series at the end of Key Stage 4 and Key Stage 5, whereby they are now migrating to a point where centre assessment grades will be provided at the end of the academic year to pupils in years 11 and 13, and also to those in year 10. In years 10 and in years 12, where that is relevant. Again, we are working with our schools to ensure that there is a consistent approach. However, schools are in different places, because you will be aware that some schools have suffered more in terms of self-isolating pupils than others, and because of that, the loss of learning will be more significant in some of our school settings than in others. As a result of yesterday's announcement by the Education Minister, the implication of that is that schools will also be the appeal centres for the grades. So if a parent or a pupil is not satisfied or has a complaint regarding the grade that has been awarded, they can appeal against that. And again, it's the school that becomes the appeal centre for that process. Again, we will be working with our schools to ensure that there is a consistent process regarding that, and we are waiting further guidance from Welsh Government. However, we welcome this because the circumstances as they are certainly it would not be fair for pupils or students in years 11 and 13 to go through the examination process as was outlined at the end of last calendar year. At the moment, we are meeting with our head teachers on a weekly basis and updating them accordingly. I've also asked Christopher Millis to put in additional smaller group meetings to ensure that we understand some of the demands that are coming through, particularly in terms of loss of learning in relation to literacy and numeracy, and also some of the emotional health and well-being issues that are beginning to surface from engagement with the pupils. Obviously, we are looking towards the end of these restrictions, but I think we are very, very mindful that that will be the start of the support that we will need to deliver when schools are operating in a far more normal way than they are currently. And on that basis, we are looking to revise our recovery planning to ensure that we have a longer term look at what the demands are in terms of compensating for the loss of learning. And I think this relates well to the Estyn document that came out at the tail end of last week. Estyn has reviewed the arrangements of local authorities and of regional consortia in terms of supporting learning and also the needs of vulnerable learners and the emotional health and well-being needs of pupils. And we are setting ourselves in the best possible position to respond to the recommendations made by Estyn. And we believe that we have already progressed significantly in some of those areas. I said that I would talk mainly about what's happened this term, but I think it is worth mentioning that during December and the last part of November, we procured or commissioned a series of health and well-being sessions for all our head teachers, both primary and secondary. We were aware of the pressure that they were under and continue to be under. And in light of that, we commissioned Andreas Pretorius, who was a Welsh rugby international, although he is South African by birth, and he runs a company called One Step North, and he has been used within the corporate body to support senior leaders. So we asked Andreas to deliver 5 or 6 workshop sessions with our head teachers, and they were very well received. So I think that's my opening introduction. I'm going to ask Andrew Thomas now to give us more detail on digital inclusion and the support for digital learning.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just want to talk to you about devices or device availability for the pupils and connectivity, because obviously there's a big focus on that at the moment, quite rightly, from the Minister and Welsh Government and of course local authorities. Just going back to the first lockdown, at the time of the first lockdown, we contacted each school to find out how many children had a deficiency or a scarcity, if you like, in terms of devices and connectivity. And through our schools, we identified 1,300 pupils. This is obviously back in March, April last year, didn't have a device, and 228 households had a lack of suitable connectivity. Our digital team in the local authority used existing devices in schools and supplies of Chromebooks and iPads to make sure that those 1,300 children, all of which had a device. And in terms of the 228 households which didn't have connectivity, we purchased through the Hub programme 200 MiFi units. And these are basically units which you plug into a power socket and they give you Wi-Fi in your house. They give you access to the cloud within your house. And we borrowed a further 28 from Swansea to make sure that each one of those households had connectivity. In terms of teachers at that time, we had no issues flagged, but of course, the amount of distance and online learning teachers were doing then compared to now isn't the same. We surveyed our schools again in December and January, last December and January 21. And at that time, we identified an additional 100 pupils who needed devices, which we've been able to meet from devices purchased from the Hub grant. And there were no connectivity issues or no further connectivity issues identified. So from that, we assume that any issues that households had, we managed to resolve the situation at the start of this lockdown. Teacher devices in the second survey was a bigger problem, and we ordered last July 551, I can tell you 1 second now, 521 teacher devices last July. They turned up in December. They are out in our schools now. So by the end of next week, all our teachers, primary, secondary and special schools, will have a device for themselves to enable online teaching. So just to summarise that situation, we checked the demand twice. We've looked at pupil connectivity and pupil device allocation, and there aren't any households out there at the moment who don't have access to connectivity. And by the end of this week or next week, when we're taking delivery of and I'll go through that in some detail now, the devices, all our teachers will be provisioned and all our pupils will be provisioned. Just to give you some idea about the number of devices that have gone into our schools since lockdown, in September 2019, so that's gone back, two years now, we supplied our schools last March, and ironically just before we went into lockdown, with 1,089 Chromebooks, 540 teacher devices, 714 iPads. Those went into our schools in March 2020. In July 20, we ordered a further 2,900 Chromebooks. Now, unfortunately, because of supply issues, and this is a supply issue across Wales and probably across Britain actually, those have come into stock this week and next week. I know we ordered them last July, but that's the way it is. But we're now taking delivery of those 2,900 Chromebooks. In September 20 last year, we ordered a further 1,617 Chromebooks, and those are coming into us in February. I mentioned last July we ordered 521 teacher devices. They came in December, so they're already in our schools. December 2020, 1,500 Chromebooks, a further 1,500 Chromebooks. They're coming in March 21. And then finally, this January 2021, we've ordered a further 1,500 Chromebooks, 718 iPads. They'll be delivered in next financial year, April the 1st, next financial year, and all of those devices will go into our primary schools. What those devices add up to is a combination of meeting what schools said they wanted in terms of device allocation right at the start of the Hub programme. And this is, following COVID. So we've decided, and the local authority, if you remember a couple of meetings ago, agreed to fund £300,000 out of its capital programme to augment the Hub programme to ensure that all our Key Stage 3, 4 and 5 pupils had one-to-one device allocation. And I think that's absolutely the right thing to do, critical in terms of where we are in terms of learning right now. And primary schools said that they wanted 1 to 3 in the foundation phase and 1 to 2 in Key Stage 2. What I've just described to you, by the time we take delivery of the last order, all our schools will be provisioned in that way. And we also have resolved the connectivity issues where they were them. So I think that's, fantastic sort of a fantastic piece of work on behalf of this authority to provision our pupils and our schools in terms of this sort of learning. I'll quickly mention lateral flow testing, and then I'll ask Hayley to come in and talk about vulnerable learners, if that's okay with you, Chair. Yeah. Our head teachers in secondary schools have had a presentation from Welsh Government around lateral flow testing. And lateral flow testing is basically series testing, where pupils are tested over a 7-day period before school. And if they test negative, then they can obviously go into school that day. And the pupils who are tested are what is known as close contacts of an index case, and an index case being somebody who is has tested positive. You'll have probably heard about this on the news. At this moment in time, none of our secondary schools are putting themselves forward as part of a wider pilot project. There's a number of reasons for this. When I think first and foremost, schools are, whilst they're open, obviously there are far fewer pupils in our schools at the moment because they're being educated at home. We're in the middle of a national lockdown. We're trying to suppress the spread of the virus. So if you like, the need isn't as great at the moment. Every one of our schools, if you like, reserve the right to get involved with this sort of testing in the future, should they feel that be needed. And I think that's right and proper. They've if you like, they've maintained their position around that. But they've got huge pressures around, other pressures about trying to keep people safe. They've got pressures around the qualifications in our secondary schools, and at the time they made this decision, the position around that wasn't known. There are also significant logistical issues which the school would have to manage for serial testing to go on in a school setting. And I think at the moment, until those are better understood and known, our heads have decided that they don't want to take part in the current pilot that's being offered, and if you like, they will maintain their position, but nevertheless retain the right to get involved in serial testing should they feel the need, particularly perhaps as schools open up, possibly after half term, and possibly more likely after the Easter holidays. So that's where we are with lateral flow testing. I'll now ask Hayley to come in and talk to you a little bit around our vulnerable learners and our inclusion service.
Thank you, Andrew. Good afternoon, everybody. Just to give an update, really, from the report.
Hayley, you're extremely quiet. I don't know if it's just me. Is it possible to look at volume at all?
It's very temperamental. Is that a bit better? Sorry.
That's better. Thank you.
Okay, I'll come closer to the mic as well. So apologies for that. It's just to give an update really from the report I gave to you last November in terms of service delivery for the inclusion service. The service is still fully operational. We've adapted to the current circumstances and to need as well. And as was mentioned earlier, we deliver both remotely and physically following risk assessments and where it's safe to do so. If I could just talk you through just a few of the services really and some updates, particularly around the areas of sort of mental health and anxiety and some of the work we've developed there. And I'll start with the school-based counselling service. So in addition to the normal service delivery, there's two helplines that we've set up. One is for school staff. So far we've helped 11 staff over 16 sessions there, and a primary helpline there where we've supported parents of primary age children, and 26 parents have taken those up over 42 sessions so far. So those are continuing. We've also developed a number of resource packs, including bereavement during pandemic. We spoke with heads and identified that as a need. Staff wellbeing packs, resource packs for parents as well, which has complemented the work of the helplines. We were fortunate to receive some grant funding. You'll be aware that statutory school-based counselling is only funded from year 6, and obviously we've wanted to work with children earlier than that age, and we're seeing the need for that sooner. So we've used the funding to develop a primary-based counselling service, and our team did some research on this to look at the best ways of delivering counselling, and we've been able to appoint some a different way of doing things. So we have play therapists, qualified play therapists and art therapists in place now, which are delivering therapy which is developmentally appropriate for our children, and would support parents and support primary school staff in delivering that as well. In addition to that, the school-based council have developed a supervision pilot as well. So looking at the impact of COVID, the emotional impact, and so we've developed a staff supervision pilot. It's a pilot in 3 comps to start with, where our qualified counsellors work with staff within the school, and they receive consultational cases. They're able to discuss issues, look how to embed training, and we've had a lot of positive feedback on that. We're also going to report on some research around that, on the impact as well. Both those developments are grant funded. We think that they are a priority going forward. So of course now is to look at how we can sustain those services going forward as well. The grant funding has also allowed us to significantly reduce our waiting lists this year for school-based counselling service. So that's been a real positive for us. In addition to that, the school-based counselling team, the wellbeing team and education psychology team work collaboratively to develop whole school training for trauma-informed schools. So that's being rolled out now across all our schools as well. Education psychology service, in response to discussions with head teachers, identified concerns around Year 11 pupils' wellbeing with exams this year and the situation with them accessing their learning. So they've developed Year 11 workshops now to promote emotional health and well-being, and that's currently being rolled out to all Year 11 pupils across our schools as well. And we continue to keep our phone lines active with EPS as well, and we've supported 36 families to date there. If I could just talk to you quickly about the Wellbeing and Cynnydd team as well. Again, they're continuing with service delivery, both remotely, but they are going into schools to support children and young people. They're doing garden visits to engage young people with their learning as well as doing regular telephone calls and Teams meetings. They also developed relationship-based play training, and they're rolling out resources to families at the moment to help them to engage with their young people around relationship-based play with indoor and outdoor learning sessions and activities. So in addition to that, the Cynnydd team, again, they're grant-funded team sitting underneath the wellbeing team, but they work directly in schools. They're all in schools at the moment. And again, they're delivering sessions with young people on well-being, on completing qualifications as well, and workshops with careers. So there's quite a lot of work going along there with the Cynnydd team. I'll just move on to our support for learning team. So they cover ASD, speech and language, hearing and vision impairment, and specific learning difficulties. Again, they're fully operational, sometimes in schools and then otherwise remote learning. We have a comprehensive training menu, so that's been delivered virtually. So the take-up on that has been really positive. Continuing with their advice clinics for schools and for families, and phone calls as well. And we've spent quite a lot of time working with health to ensure that their services are still running within our schools, particularly in terms of speech and language and occupational therapy as well. So that's continuing with us at the moment. And the last thing really is to bring you up to date really in terms of our readiness for ALN reform. So we've been looking at early years and getting prepared for the 0 to 3 additional responsibility. We appointed a little while ago, it's a statutory post that's coming in, early years additional learning needs officer. So that officer's in post now, is working very closely with our education psychologist for early years and has developed a number of resources as a support line for parents and carers of early years children, networking sessions. They've got to work it together Wednesday with professionals where they get together, creating a range of resources as well, and some multi-agency planning around pathways and processes then to get us ready for reform. And just to finish really, just to tell you, we're on the other end of the scale, we're 16 to 25, increasing our responsibilities. So we're working a lot with the further education with Neath College, just to look at how we develop and the IDP, the new statutory system. We've set up a pilot with Mice Coed, so young people get to spend 3 days in college. So that was working up until sort of COVID came in again, and hopefully will continue when college reopen in February. And that helps to develop independence, further qualifications for young people while they're still in post-16 in Mice Coed. And in terms of readiness for reform, we're leading on 3 areas for the region, and those are transition, so looking at transition, and we're also looking at the impacts of being out of school and transition resources to help young people back into school at the moment. Early dispute resolution training for schools, and outcomes training, which is part of the new statutory IDP framework that's coming in as well. So our next steps now are just waiting for the final code. We believe it's due in March. and we are waiting government timelines now for conversion as well, because the date at the moment is still set for, and I don't think it's going to move, September of this year. And I think that's sort of it in a nutshell, if that's all right.
Thank you for that, Hayley. I'll move on very briefly then to Chris, who's going to give us a brief update on remote learning, and then with your agreement, Chair, we can open it up for questions. Chris?
Thank you, Aled. Thank you, Chair. The distance learning guidance was produced in December in readiness for our schools that possibly wouldn't be returning fully open, and it was sent out to schools about 2 weeks ago. I'd like to acknowledge how hard all staff in and out of schools are working to promote the continuity of learning, and schools are facing challenging times. We've linked this guidance to online safety as well as live streaming and video conferencing safeguarding principles to protect all people using it. And as an authority, we are working with our schools to make sure that we promote whatever method of delivery is being used, that teaching and learning activities have a clear purpose and planned outcomes, and the needs of individual learners who are at home are known, understood and met. The plan includes about 20 action points where education officers are linked with schools, which includes inclusion officers, psychologists, music, Welsh language, youth work. My ESOs on a weekly basis work with schools, and we're keeping in touch with them to ask questions such as how many pupils are attending, who's engaged, what are you doing about the pupils not being engaged, what work is being put online for them, and how do you know it's of a good quality. Some examples of that would be from a primary school, live lessons are put on every morning through Microsoft Teams. There's a focus on literacy and numeracy via Hub J2 package. Our officers are supporting and training teachers, staff. There was a supply work going on last week where 100 staff were trained on the use of different packages. One of our secondary schools is using Google Classroom and Teams, and they've invested a huge amount of extra professional development in the staff to focus on teaching to support the engagement online. And then we have another primary school, for example, Welsh Medium Primary School, that is promoting through nursery and reception engagement with the parents involved, online activities to do with videos being recorded to help parents, phonics, reading stories, practicing language, that sort of thing. So along with the distance learning process, we're also supporting our schools through the curriculum reform, and in Welsh Government released refined guidance on that for January 2020. The explicit recommendation is that schools are working on developing vision and curriculum design. All our support staff are working alongside school staff to make sure that it happens. We've met with over 50 head teachers in small groups to discuss and work alongside them. We have the Curriculum Advisory Group, the CAG, which is a stakeholder group that is working alongside our schools. As Aled mentioned earlier, we are now refining into smaller groups so head teachers can have a platform to discuss issues relating to any of the topics that we've talked about today. And it's how best we can balance blended learning and develop it primary, secondary and special school going forward. Even if we return to school being open as normal, blended learning has a place in our schools to support those youngsters that may not attend all day, every day. And then with co-construction with senior leaders, we are looking at developing and producing the strategy for learning and teaching. And it is a long-term strategy, and it's going to be, like I said, co-constructed. And behind the scenes, as an extra piece of information, our youth service has been awarded the bronze quality mark. It's been awarded that at the highest level it can be awarded. It's a pass with no recommendations. And the bronze quality mark is achieved when an organisation demonstrates provision under four main factors: performance, quality, learning and legal requirements. Assessor was quoted to say the assessors were so impressed with the professionalism and dedication of all the staff, and the impact they're making on young people's lives is highly commendable. And this document can be shared, Chair, with you as when it's produced. Thank you, Aled.
Thank you very much, Chris, Aled, Andrew and Hayley. That's a very informative report. I know we've got a pre-question from Councillor Jane Jones, and I've been informed of one from Rebecca Phillips, and other hands are going up now. So I'm going to take the first two and move forward. So Councillor Jane Jones, if you'd like to put your question.
Good afternoon all. What I'm thinking about is children of 2020 are so seriously going wrong. I've got 3 grandchildren in primary and secondary school and who prefer to read to play on the machines instead of doing their work. Is it at all possible or feasible to add these children to an extra year?
Thank you, Jane. That's an interesting question. Obviously, what we're focusing in at the moment is to ensure that wherever possible, we continue the education for all students and for all pupils. I think schools will have to assess, as I said earlier, I think this is the start of the recovery. Once schools get back to some kind of normality, it'll be the start of recovery for pupils, and there will be a need for us to assess exactly what loss of learning has happened. I think there are reports such as the Estin one that was produced recently. There are other reports from other sources that are colouring our thinking, but at the moment there is no intention for a blanket bringing back of year groups 1 year, I think it's a case of looking at each child's needs, assessing those needs, assessing how we can compensate for the loss of learning and how we can accelerate that. And I don't underestimate that task. I spoke to Andrew earlier today, and I think we do need to impress upon Welsh Government the need for additional funding going forward. There's been significant awarding of funding over the past year, but that does need to continue for at least the next 2 years.
Thank you, Aled.
Thank you. You okay with that, Jane?
Yes, I'm fine, Chair.
Okay. In that case, I move on to the question through Jane Woodman-Ralph from Rebecca Phillips.
Yes, Chair, thank you. The question from Councillor Phillips is that she's received great concern from non-Welsh speaking parents whose children attend Welsh medium schools. How do we as an authority support these parents?
Thanks for that. Yeah. Again, we have been very proactive with our schools. We understand that it is difficult for non-Welsh speaking parents. However, at the same time, there are means of ensuring that youngsters are translating for their parents, and that engagement can be a very linguistic, rich experience whereby the child is talking to parents in another language about the work that they are undertaking in another language. It's called translanguaging, and that is a very sophisticated and a very rich experience, both for the child and hopefully for the parent as well. As has been acknowledged in the Estin report, Neath for Talbot has been doing a lot of work, particularly around early years, in developing means of ensuring that nursery rhymes and all sorts of singing games are provided, whereby parents don't have to have a significant knowledge of the language to actually support youngsters at those points. However, I do take the point that Councillor Phillips has raised, and we are looking through our ESOs on how we can enhance that. But I would say that schools, it was interesting, I had an email this morning from a parent that was singing the praises of one of our Welsh medium schools regarding the way that they are engaging with parents and also engaging with pupils. As I think Chris mentioned, we are still at a point of discovery in terms of delivering remote learning for youngsters. Again, referring to the Estin report, they do their reference reports from other parts of the UK that seems to suggest that the average engagement is around 2.5 hours per day. And that seems to be less in Wales than it is in other countries within the UK. And we need to look at why that is the case. And I think it's a case of keeping on promoting this with parents. And I would hope that our elected members would be equally proactive in ensuring that parents and grandparents as well, Jane, are supporting their children in whatever way is possible. Excuse me.
Thank you. Is that fair enough, Councillor Phillips?
Yes, she said that's fine. Yes.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Jane. In that case, we moved on. We've got Councillor David Whitlock, followed by Councillor Mizzen. David.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report, all. It's a good report as usual. A lot of talk on the report or in the report about the well-being of the children, which is obviously foremost in all our thoughts. I think I know the answer before I ask a question, but can somebody briefly outline the extra support in place for staff, and not only teaching staff, all staff at this time with stress and their well-being?
Yeah, I'm happy to start on that. I'm sure that perhaps Hayley would want to add to this. As has been said, we have provided universal workshops for all our head teachers, primary, secondary and special, and those were 5 or 6 sessions. They were 1.5 hour sessions that were looking at ensuring that our senior leaders were developing behaviours and developing habits that would minimise stress and pressure in their lives. Equally, we are meeting with small groups of head teachers to ensure that we have regular sort of touch base meetings with them to understand on a weekly basis what are the pressures that are realising themselves within school settings. We also meet with trade unions on a weekly basis or a bi-weekly, fortnightly basis. And as Hayley indicated, we have set up kind of drop-in sessions or dial-in sessions where by our education psychologist team, our school counselling service, and a range of different officers are able to support needs where that is needed. It's a very, very difficult circumstance at the moment because people are not seeing each other, and the social interaction that we all thrive upon is being withdrawn. But it's trying to compensate for that in the most meaningful sense, but also trying to grow habits and behaviours that allow people to build resilience at these times. I don't know if Hayley wants to add something to that.
Sorry, I was just waiting to see if Hayley came in. I know she's having some connectivity issues. She's been messaging me to say she's been in, she's out, she's in, she's out. I think she's in at the moment, but I'm not 100% sure. Just. Sorry. Can you? While Hayley's trying to come back in, I do know, I think Ali mentioned it, the School-Based Counselling Service set up a helpline for all school staff, not just the head teachers, obviously, but all school staff that they could access on a confidential basis throughout last year. Hayley, are you back in?
Yes, I'm here now. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Apologies for that. Yes, I'm sorry I didn't catch the question fully, but if it's regarding sort of welfare of school staff, I believe, or wellbeing of school staff, as Andrew said, school-based counselling are supporting. There's the phone line that they can use. There are clinics that they can access. And there's also the peer mentoring that I discussed earlier that we're piloting in our schools, and we'll be rolling that out as well to support a teaching staff.
Can I also add, Chair, that ESO staff are visiting schools when it's safe and appropriate to do so, and are working with staff face-to-face on the development of the curriculum and blended learning and training. So the training is online and can be face-to-face when it's appropriate and safe to do so.
Thank you. If I can ask for Councillor Mizzen then to ask his question.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's not a question as such. It's just a statement. I mean, I know we're in difficult times at the moment. You know, it's a crazy world we're living in. But I'm very happy as an authority. We seem to have done everything we possibly can to enable our pupils to be educated at home, and giving our equipment to the teachers and to the schools to enable them to educate our pupils at home. So I just like to thank everybody involved, really, the officers, the teaching staff, headmasters, support staff, cleaners, everything, for the incredible work they're doing. You know, it's a hell of a task, but we seem to be doing everything fantastically. So I'd just like to thank everybody involved. So that's all I want to say.
Thank you for that, Councillor Mizzen. I think it is worth mentioning at this point, and I had thought of mentioning it earlier. As you all know, we have daily epidemiological summaries from the health boards. And before Christmas, we were recording figures of almost, well, over 1,000 per 100,000 population. As you will be aware, there are two key indicators that we look at. One is the positivity rate, and the second is the per 100,000 rate. And linking in with what Councillor Mizzen said there, before Christmas, we were over 1,000 per 100,000. Today, it's 266 per 100,000. So that's a massive drop, and that is related to the behaviours of people. And I don't think we can underestimate that or emphasize that, how important it is. You know, we are, through our daily briefings, with our weekly briefings with heads, informing them, please continue to talk to children about the importance of protective behaviours. The positivity rate this morning was 17.7 compared to 33% before Christmas. So things are going in the right direction. Obviously, we are very wary of the new variant, but I think the behaviours that we have established through our pupils and through our staff are seemingly having a positive impact on the infection rate in Neath Talbot.
Thank you, Aled, and thank you, Ridian. I'm going to call on Councillor Jane Jones, who's got a follow-up.
Yes, I was wondering all the links that Hayley has told us about, whether you can be sent out to all members.
Okay, that was for those that couldn't see, that was agreement.
Yeah, Chair Hayley, if you just send them to me, I can circulate it to the members then.
Okay, thank you, Charlotte. I will do.
Thank you, Charlotte. I see no further questions indicated from members. I have a couple, and then I was going to bring in Councillor Rees as the cabinet member who wanted to say something. I again, like my co-chair, Councillor Mizzen, wanted to congratulate you on an excellent report and on the level of work that seems to be going on and the way schools and children are being supported. My question was very much on what basis are laptops and Chromebooks and iPads and whatever being provided for pupils? Is it a loan? Is it what's the basis and how is that being handled, please?
Do you want me to cover that? Yeah. They're not owned by the pupils, they're owned by the schools, but they're given to the pupils in secondary schools, for instance, where there's one-to-one. That's your device for the period that you're in the school. for obvious reasons. But you know, you don't get to keep it at the end. You got to hand it back when you finish. But they're very much in secondary schools. They're very much they're that pupil's device, so that they use it exclusively for their learning. Obviously, in the primary sector, where the device allocation is lower, as in one device for every 3 foundation phase and every 2 children in Key Stage 2, they obviously have to share, and in doing so, they have to be mindful of you know, the COVID issues around, you know, cleanliness and making sure that there's no transference of the virus. So it's a shared basis in the primary sector, and it's a one-to-one device in the secondary.
Thank you. And secondly, I wondered if lateral flow testing was going to be offered to childcare providers and workers.
I don't think at the moment, Chair. I'm not 100% sure on that. I think, as Andrew said, schools are looking at this in terms of what may happen after half term, but I'm not aware that they are being used in the childcare sector. They are being used, or they are proposed to being used in the social care sector, particularly for adult care, but not so much for childcare.
The concern is raised because those childcare workers are in work with a range of children. Childcare provision is open, so it's not the same as the school sector, and intimate links with children are very difficult to avoid. So I'd ask that to be considered.
Yeah. What I'll do, Chair, with your agreement, I'll take that back to our gold meeting on Monday, and then we'll raise that with Andrew Jarrett at that point.
Thank you very much, Director. And I have one more question that's come in since we started that, and Councillor Joe Hale.
Sorry, Chair. My question was answered. It was similar to the one that you asked, so that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Apologies for that. In that case, if I call on Councillor Peter Rees.
Thank you, Chair. And actually, Rydian and yourself have taken what I was going to say, but I will say it anyway. I'm so proud to be the cabinet member of such a dedicated team of professionals, and it's an exceptional team, as has been evidenced, I think, by the Estin report. The work that they've done over this period, over this very difficult period, is exceptional, and I just wanted to place on record my thanks to them and to all the support staff as well, and I mean right through the education service, and that goes for the schools and everybody else. It has been exceptional, and I think it's evidenced by what Aled has said about the rates coming down. You know, I had a chat with Aled this morning, and he told me about the rates, and I said, well, we're heading in the right direction. So I just wanted to say thank you to everybody, and you know, keep up the good work. Let's hope that we can get our schools back as soon as we possibly can for the purpose of learning and to protecting the education of our pupils. So thanks to everybody.
Thank you, Councillor Rees. I think the whole committee would underwrite that at the present time, and I see no negative indications on that. So I think you can take it that that's from all of us. In that case, if we've finished with that, thank you for that, and we'll move on to the consultation, the discussion on the budget consultation 21-22 budget proposals. So this is to allow members to scrutinise the proposals within the education, skills and culture remit, and to feed into the consultation overall. And in that case, you know, can you think about that as you're putting proposals? What we'd also ask is that if you make a comment where you want something changed to the budget, if you're looking at a change, although a lot of the proposals are fed on from the previous year and have already been approved and taken through, then because the council has to set a balanced budget, can you make an indication of where you believe that change could be balanced out, how you think that change could be taken forward, and what alternative arrangements would need to be made? So I'm going to ask Aled Evans if he would like to make any comments on this before we get started.
I've got no specific comment to make on the report, other than to respond to any questions that members may have. I don't know if Andrew, who is leading on this for us, wants to add anything.
Would it be helpful if I just take members very quickly through the directorate issues? It's very easy to write these things, but sometimes it's much easier to explain them in terms of what they mean in the real world, if you know what I mean, Chair.
Certainly, certainly, Andrew.
So I'm going to start then with just the extra funding of pressures provided. So it's point 8. I think it's page 16 of 28 in the report. Does everybody here? Because everything before that is just explains the corporate position, and then bullet point 8 starts with the directorate issues, if you like. So these are the pressures that we are proposing and consulting on providing for. And the first one is an additional learning needs investment of £430,000. The first £100,000 of that £430,000 is to fund the cost of employing staff, which have already been agreed by this committee last year. We didn't, because obviously ALN reform is being implemented in September 21. Even though members have agreed a range of posts previously, we didn't fill them all because the implementation date is in September 21. Now we need to fill those posts, and that's why that pressure is in there. And the rest of that £430,000, Chair, is to fund the cost of bringing staff in schools, out of schools, to cover the costs of them, so that we can train them in the requirements of the ALN reform, and in specifically what's required around the development of what will be known as individual development plans, which, as members will know, replace statements of special education needs under the ALNet reform bill. Shall I stop after each one for questions, or shall I carry on?
I think go through them, Andrew, and we'll catch up afterwards. I've got a set of questions which I'd like to start with, which have already been informed to me. So
yeah, okay, fine. The next one, out of county placements, as the paragraph says, that we do everything we possibly can, including increasing the number of specialist provisions we have within county. Having said that, there are rare occurrences where we have to place a child out of county. It's normally jointly placed with ourselves and Children's Services. So that £87,000 represents known children in the system where we have to meet their education needs outside of Neath Talbot. And believe me, that is now the exception rather than the rule. The next one, in terms of free school meals, since COVID, we've seen quite a significant increase in the number of children who are entitled to free school meals, which of course means in terms of our catering services, there will be fewer pupils paying for their school meals. So that £315,000 represents what we believe will be, it's an estimate, obviously, but it's the estimate of what we think we will lose in terms of catering income in the next financial year as a result of more pupils being entitled to free school meals. And then the next one is a really interesting one, actually. The increased provision for teaching assistants, £750,000. In the way the school budgets are delegated, there has been historically a fixed sum of money to fund TA hours support attached to pupils with a statement of special education needs in a mainstream school. That pot of money that we've been using to fund those hours has been fixed, basically, probably for the last 10 years. As that paragraph suggests, the number of hours over the last 10 years, shall we say, has gone up exponentially. And you can see that, because I thought members would like to see some idea of how much they've gone up. Since 2016, they've gone up from 3,189 hours, TA hours per week to 6,985. And obviously, if you'd gone back further, then you'd have seen the increase was even more significant. But because you've got more hours calling on the same size pot of funding, the result of that is every time a school gets a child with a statement with TA hours attached, they are getting an ever decreasing percentage of the actual cost of employing that member of staff, which they have a legal obligation to do. So, you know, if you imagine £20,000 being 100% of the cost, we've probably funding at the moment something like 8 or 9% of the cost of the actual employment of those individuals. So, to be fair to Howell, I've been having these conversations with him for some time now, and you'll see. I know we're talking about £750,000 now, but if you look at the detail at the moment, this is and we're only consulting on 1 year, but there's a proposal at the moment to put £750,000 into this budget for the next 3 years, and that's obviously a cumulative effect of £2.25 million, so that some schools are really significantly affected by this, because the number of statemented children in mainstream schools is not an even playing field. Some schools attract because of their demographic, one reason. Sometimes a school gets a reputation for being really good at dealing with children with SEN, and ironically, that causes them a problem because more parents want to put pupils into that school because they've got that good reputation. But unfortunately, financially, that is quite crippling, or can be. So, as I say, it's not an even playing field. Some schools have got significant deficits at the moment, and this will help them significantly if this goes through the consultation exercise. Margam Park for next year. Oh, sorry, I've missed out Celtic. The result of COVID on Celtic Leisure, we're proposing that we fund them as a one-off reserve movement, £1 million extra to overcome the loss of income as a result of, well, one, being closed, and two, as a result of being closed, they've lost members because, you know, people don't want to go to gyms. They're worried about the transmission of the virus. So we estimate that there's £1 million cost there. And then the loss of income in Margam Park due to the Orangery being used as a local vaccination centre. Though that £279,000 refers only to the Orangery, and it's a net loss. So we've taken off all the costs, the variable costs, and which we have to do for Welsh Government, and that £279,000 after all the costs which we can avoid is a net cost of £279,000 pressure next year. Because at the moment, Health have an agreement to use the Orangery for virtually all of the financial year. And on one level, of course, when you're trying to fight the virus, that's a positive thing. In terms of savings which have already been agreed, you referred to those earlier, Chair. They're the cleaning services that's been previously agreed last year. So that's a move to full cost recovery on our cleaning service. That £55,000 in effect will result in increased charges to schools. And £30,000 for out-of-county transport is our known pupils who are leaving the school in Bridgend, whose name escapes me again.
Heronsbridge.
Thank you very much, Heronsbridge. So we know those pupils are leaving, so we know we can make those savings. And then obviously there's some information there about, if you like, the uncertainty from COVID in terms of market conditions. So that, in essence, Chair, that's it. So I think we're all ready to answer questions that crop up.
Thank you very much, Andrew. And the first question is a more general one from Councillor Jones. Jane? No?
I said my what I wanted to say earlier.
No,
Chair.
You've said it.
I think it's Councillor Del Morgan, Chair.
Yes, I know. He's on my list. I just need to go through the people who registered in pre-briefing. Del Morgan.
Diolch yn fawr, Cadeirydd. Thank you, Chair. First of all, just thinking back to the last item, I would also like to thank the officers for all the developments that we've heard. Tremendous outcomes in terms of additional items of equipment, all those projects we've heard from different parts of the Directorate. I really do thank them. But can I say that in thanking them, the focus really is on the fact that the developments have happened so quickly. That's really special. And I think that sets the backdrop, Chair, for my question, I suppose. 2021-22 budget, this, I presume, has been set over the past few months and based on both normal and COVID-related pressures that we face. Now, people will be aware that far more recently, we are seeing, sadly, even more and deeper concerns arising, thinking about, even more far-reaching pressures arising from COVID. And these can affect our schools and potentially the current cohorts of children in a more long-lasting way. So, we are aware that this situation could go on and on much longer than we originally thought. Our budget before us, Chair, includes additional support, as we've just heard from Andrew, in terms of ALN, teaching assistants, free school meals. So they've been built in already. And we've, of course, as I've just said, we've invested quite a lot in equipment and in blended learning. But given the possibilities of even deeper and longer ramifications with this COVID, are officers confident that we've got enough in our budget, even so at the moment, for education? Thinking in particular about the potential need for more major expenditure later in the year, which I suppose I'm basing on developments that we can't yet predict, yet we really do suspect are coming down the line. So are we confident that we've got enough in there just in case, Chair? Yeah.
If I can start, then I'm sure others may want to come in, Chair. I think what we are confident in at the moment is that we have a really strong partnership with our schools, and we are confident that many of the mitigating actions that we have taken are serving us well. As I said earlier, we have already started our recovery planning, and I think it's important that we actually cost some of that planning, because I think Welsh Government, and I'm sure that they will be receptive to this, they need to understand that there will be a need for investment, both in terms of academic needs and in terms of the emotional health and well-being needs of pupils and of staff, I would hasten to add, in the coming years. And I think Councillor Morgan is correct in saying that the effects of COVID will be with us for quite a while. It's a case of making sure that we are doing the right things in the most efficient way. Many of you will be aware that we are developing an anti-poverty strategy, and it's about making sure that youngsters are supported from the earliest years possible. We have, and I'm sure the Chair will be aware of this, we have developed a more coordinated approach around early years provision. We have a early years pathfinder that is seeking to be far more efficient and effective in the way that it delivers. I think it was it Donald Rumsfeld who said something along the lines of not knowing what you know on knowing what you don't know, or something of that nature. And I think you referred to that, Councillor Morgan. We don't know, unfortunately, exactly what is ahead of us, but what we need to be is far more proactive in understanding what the demands are in terms of recovery, and take those messages back to Welsh Government so that they are funded properly.
Thank you. I think there are known knowns known unknowns and unknown unknowns. So
was it Donald Rumsfeld?
I can't remember. I'm not that good. Not without Google. Okay.
Too complicated for Donald Trump.
Okay. I wanted to move on then to Councillor Sandra Miller, and then it will be Councillor Ridian Mizzen and Councillor Matt Crowley.
Chair, is there any chance I could come in on the last question, please?
Certainly, Carol.
Thanks. Yeah, just in response to that question particularly, obviously, as everyone has already said, we don't know what we don't know. But what I would say is we've been supported extremely well by Welsh Government. They have, any extra costs we've had, we've given explanations to Welsh Government, and we have had the funding to cover those extra costs in the main. Maybe not every penny, but we've had a substantial amount during the last year for extra costs. And there's nothing to suggest that that won't continue. As long as they have money, they will pass money back to us. Obviously, in the budget, there is an extra £430,000 allocated for ALN, and there are extra funds of £315,000 for extra free school meals that we predict may be needed due to the change of circumstances of parents. When we are out of school times in, say, Christmas and in the holidays, it costs us £100,000 per week to give that money direct to the parents for free school meals. In our council, it's a BACS transfer direct into the accounts of the parents, so that the children continue to be fed while they aren't in school during the COVID crisis. So what I anticipate is there is a lot of extra funding going into schools. There's no cuts, and as I see it, we are still continuing to give a bill, if you like, to Welsh Government for extra costs incurred for COVID. And to be fair to the ministers, they have listened to us. They've been very, very supportive, both Rebecca and Julie James. Julie being the cabinet minister for local government, and Rebecca Evans being the cabinet member for finance. And they've been very open and honest with what money they have, and they have supported councils throughout Wales, whatever colour they are. And I hope that will continue. So, you know, just a praise would be, there is extra money going into education. We don't know what extra costs there could be, but up until now, we have been supported very well by Welsh Government. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Clement Williams. In that case, we move on to Councillor Sandra Miller.
Thank you, Chair. This is just a bit of a concern in relation to the cleaning services. It's on page 17 and page 18. And I know that we've agreed that this should be a 3-year process in moving to schools funding the service completely. How confident can we be, bearing in mind where we've come from, where we are at present, and where we're likely to go? How confident are we that we are able to do the transfer of service to schools without absolutely undermining their ability to pay for it? Because obviously, as we know, schools have different positions on their budget areas. So how confident are we that this can be delivered without any harm in light of the circumstances that we're in now?
Thank you for that, Chair. Yeah, just to be clear, we are not transferring any services to schools. We will still be maintaining the service to schools. we have cleaning services operating in all our primary schools, in our special schools, and I think in one of our secondary schools. So it's a case of maintaining the quality of what is being delivered. The cost will be increased and it will be less than £1,000 per school based on that saving amount there. But, you know, it's a case of schools, and they do appreciate what is being delivered. And I would say that in the lockdown days, I think our cleaning service, again, has gone way over and above expectation in terms of what it is delivering. And I don't think they would get that quality of service from any external provider. As you know, schools do have the option of, and some of our secondary schools have taken that opportunity. They do have the option of engaging with an external provider. But in my mind, the service provided by our cleaning service is good value for money, of a high quality, and actually goes the extra mile very often, as has been proven over the recent months. I think that is a reasonable expectation from schools. Obviously, there are some schools whose budgets are more strapped than others, but even within those circumstances, I would still argue that it's good quality value for money.
Do you want to come back on that at all, Councillor Miller?
Yes, please, if you don't mind. I'm not disagreeing with, you know, with the director. You know, the services that our schools have from the cleaning services are second to none, and I wouldn't want to see that altering going forward, because there's nothing quite as good as in-house services in delivering for the areas that they're having to deliver. So I'm content with that, but I am concerned in relation to where budgets are, you know, any reserves, etc. Some schools are better placed than others, and I know I wouldn't want to see them walking away from the service because it is allegedly cheaper outside. Thank you, Chair.
Registering that Andrew Thomas wants to come in. Is it on that point, Andrew?
Yes, it is, Chair. And the Councillor Miller, you know, raises an important point. I don't think any school welcomes an increased cost. And nobody wants to give schools an increased cost. But if your fear is really around, do we think that schools will actually exercise their right to go outside of the council provided services? I would say right now, the service has never been on a more solid footing, mainly because of the way it's reacted to the demands of COVID. Truthfully, our secondary schools are clambering to get into the council-run cleaning service, and we simply at this moment in time we haven't got the sort of the capacity to sort of see to that request. But you know, we've had nothing but praise about our service. We know, as you say, Sandra, it's second to none. So if your real concern is about, do we think schools will, because of budgets, exercise their right to go to an external contractor, I think they will prioritise their budgets to make sure that they maintain their services with the council cleaning service, such as its reputation and the way it's responded to COVID. I know that doesn't overcome the budget issue, and I take your point around that. It is having said that, it is a good settlement this year. You know, Carol Clement spoke earlier. We're putting more money into schools. The ALN budget, if it is approved, will go to ease some of those budget issues that we see in some of our schools, which will enable schools then to take on the additional costs. But I think we've never been on a more solid footing in terms of the service provided by the council cleaning service, and the catering for that matter.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Councillor Miller. In that case, I'll move to Councillor Rydian Mizzen, Vice Chair. You had 3 questions. I'll leave you to it.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, well, I'm happy with 2 of the answers. One Andrew gave on Celtic Leisure, and one Councillor Carol Clement Williams gave on the free school meals. So we're asking about numbers, but I've got one at Margam Park. But if I may, Chair, before I do, I'd like to put Alan's mind at ease and say it was indeed Donna Rumsfeld who said, as we know, there are known knowns, there are things we know, we also know there are known unknowns. That is to say, we know there are some things we do not know. So in that case, I'll ask Andrew, does he know? He did say on the Margam Park, it says we've cancelled everything for 21-22. Now then, if things do ease and we get back to some sort of normality, I know if people cancel, they will go as well, as Councillor Crowley informed us. But do you think if we do ease some sort, are we open then for people to book it in 2022? Say, obviously 21 is gone, but would we be open for bookings in 22 if we do ease, if you're allowed, sort of thing?
Absolutely. You know, I think we've got to be realistic about the number of weddings we could book at short notice. But yeah, the minute the Orangery is, if you like, handed back to us as an Orangery and not a vaccination centre, we've got all our plans ready to re-energise our wedding trade, our conference trade. So it's, and we're taking bookings for 22-23. But clearly we can't take bookings when during that period the health have got at the moment, for obvious reasons, because we had to contact, I think it was 64 brides and grooms to tell them your wedding's off. I don't want to be doing that twice on the same year anyway.
Yeah, that's fine.
I got Paul, you were looking to come in, Paul Walker.
Yeah, just to reiterate what Andrew was saying, Chair, yes, the staff at the Orangery did a magnificent job gently moving 64 weddings, some of which had already been moved because of the pandemic. And whilst brides and grooms and parents weren't happy, every bit of correspondence we had was very complimentary about the Orangery staff and the way they dealt with it. What we have proposed is, as the vaccination process moves forward, we have a break clause with health in 6 months. Dates are still there for the bride and groom or the couples. If they so wish to move back their wedding into this year, if the vaccination centre close it, if the Orange reverts back to a facility for weddings, they have the option, and 1 or 2 have indicated that they may wish to do that. So that option's still there, but it will depend on the length of time that it remains a vaccination centre, Councillor Mizen.
Thank you, Paul, and thanks to all the staff there for the efforts taken. And if we move on to the last question I've got down, I've just seen Councillor Rees there at the end. Can I ask Councillor Matt Crowley, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a couple of comments followed by a question. I'd just like to say the director alluded to partnership working in his spiel to us, and I think that that's attributed to where this authority first started back in 1996 with partnership working with schools, setting up the Llan and Nash agreements. And obviously that was a groundbreaking situation, and that long may continue, and the schools working with us. In terms of, I couldn't quite hear what Carol Clement said, Councillor Carol Clement said, unfortunately, because the signal was breaking down. However, I got the bit about her thanking the Welsh Government for its support with us in supplying funds, etc., for this nasty time that we have. I have already made this statement, but I will make it again. I believe the Welsh Government could not have managed without local authorities delivering on the ground. It's easy for them to pass the money. The money was passed from central government to Welsh Government, but the people who delivered this is the people who are in this room, on this chat room today, and I pay tribute to our officers for an exemplary way that they have provided the information for us this afternoon, and more importantly to what they've done for our pupils and parents throughout this pandemic. We would not be in this position of a good news story. I do thank the Welsh Assembly for providing the money. However, I do believe they couldn't have done it without us. I go back to Donald Rumsfeld. I got to thank Rydian for Google, because I don't think he would have come up with that otherwise. That was just a little bit of fun that I have with Rydian on times. I will say, under the fair funding arrangements that were brought into local government some years ago, the opting out of schools, they can do it. Our primaries can opt out now, and of course, but at that time, back in 2000, the Education Department decided to set up its own cleaning services within its own directorate under education, and thank God that we did that at that time. When you look at Councillor Miller's question, she makes it quite rightly, and she makes it every time, regarding the cleaning services. We know it's a cost to schools, and the bigger the school, the bigger the cost. That's the way it's worked out. It's obvious it's based on floor space. However, when you look at the 55k that we're asking for this year from the schools, you know, I actually proposed it last year that we staggered it over a 2-year period. However, when you break down the 55,000 that we're going to be reclaiming back from the schools, it's working out at a mere £750 per school, or thereabouts. And I'm sure, as Andrew quite rightly said, it's a situation where schools, it's a wonderful service run by great people, and you know, it's coming to its own in this particular pandemic, as I see it, because of the work that they've delivered on the ground. So I can't see, for the schools that I govern, governing bodies I'm on, and one of them is an extra large school, I'm sure that head teachers will realise the extra effort that's been made at this time. Them are my comments. My question is, Andrew, obviously, and to Paul with Margam Park, in terms of the 279,000 that the Orangery is potentially going to lose as net income, I take, great pleasure in that we offered up the Orangery as a vaccination centre. I think it makes perfect sense. It's just off the motorway. It's out on its own, so social distancing can be adhered easily. However, I would like to ask Andrew and/or Paul, are we going to get the 279,000 back from the Welsh Assembly under the COVID monies that are available to local authorities? That's my question, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you for those comments, Matthew. We'll certainly ask for the funding. Carol Clement Williams made the point earlier. The Welsh Government have been very, very, they haven't given us every penny, but they've certainly been very fair with us. And we would expect them to continue. They know that we're handing over the Orangery as part of the national effort to battle this, terrible virus that we're all fighting at the moment. To be fair to the leader, he made it very clear when Health expressed an interest in the Orangery that this is part of our response in Neath Batolford. It's only a small part, but it is an important part of our response to this pandemic. Obviously, we're very hopeful of getting that money back, Matthew, but should we not, I still think we've done the right thing, because, vaccinating vulnerable people is more important.
I only asked that question. I probably knew the answer before I asked it, Andrew. But, like everything else, it could be a pressure for us down the line. And we all have to recognise the pressures particularly our officers in slimlining their part of the directorate and ultimately coming to us for the yes or the no of it. But I just wanted to flag it up as extra pressure, and hopefully that we can claim it back. But thank you, thanks everybody for today for all your efforts.
Thank you, Councillor Crowley and Andrew. And I too was going to congratulate the Vice Chair on his skillful and rapid use of internet search engines. I've got the Cabinet Member for Education wishing to come in now, and that would be followed, or I'll take Councillor Carol Clement Williams first, if I may, Peter.
Yeah, just very briefly, Chair, just for the cleaning and the costs on that. Standard cleaning is as it is, but the outbreak deep cleaning is covered by the hardship fund, and we do claim it back from Welsh Government. And there is a 3.5% increase in the overall budget anyway. Thank you.
Thanks for clarifying that, Cabinet Member. And I'll go then to Councillor Peter Rees for his comments.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sonia. Thank you very much. I just want to say thank you to everybody for their questions, because I think they've been very pertinent, quite frankly. And thank you for the scrutiny committee for those questions. Can I just say about Margam Park that the amount of work that's gone on in Margam Park, and I was particularly pleased to see the initiative taken up about the grant for the new orchard, Paul, and and that is again another area where we can develop Margam Park, and it could be a real tourist attraction in future. So I just want to say there is initiatives going on. It's not just stopped. Everybody's working hard, and I want to put my thanks to the team in Margam Park as well. And Paul will know that I speak with him and with Mike and the team. They're doing a tremendous job. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, everybody. I've got no indication of further questions. I don't know if you wanted to say something in response to that at all, Paul, or...
Just, Chair, that although we've been in a terrible place for the last 10 months, we have taken the opportunity in Margam to carry on. The orange refurbishment, which Howell funded last year, that has now been completed. So the new carpet is down. The West Pavilion bar is now ready, although it's a staff room at the moment for the health board. It will open. The bridal suite has been refurbished, and the female toilet. So we have successfully completed internally. Externally, we've now got the huge walk-in fridge freezers, which Matthew will appreciate, will really increase the offer at the park. I think the Tinnaheath is part of the major project we are working on with regard to the Adrenaline area, but we have worked closely with the Friends, the Hancock Garden. The work there with the volunteers has been going on quietly, subject to COVID restrictions. And our head gardener, Jeanette, yes, the orchard will go back. I've been told that it was one of the first cider producing orchards in Wales during its time. I'm not going to say we'll be making cider anymore, but it will be nice to put back the orchard and the Hancock Garden, and hopefully increase other visitors to the park to view these attractions. So, I'd like to thank the staff at the park, because they have worked hard during this period, and it's been a strange old time, as we all know. Thank you for the opportunity, Chair.
A really sad note about the cider. Margam branded cider would be very pleasant, I suspect, and quite possibly a money earner. So you might think about it again. Can I then ask, I've got a final point then from Councillor Sandra Miller.
Sorry, Chair, I didn't want to...
Your hand went up and it must have sneaked it on its own. It happens sometimes. Thank you. Okay. In that case, we'll move to end this discussion. It is an item to be noted, and will go on to form part of the consultation input. Obviously, councillors are free to input further into the consultation as they see fit, and we hope that you'll encourage your local residents to do so as well. Therefore, we move to the forward work programme, again for noting.
Chair.
If you'd like to say something, Charlotte.
Yeah, sorry, just before we put that item to a close, I just wanted to give members just a last opportunity, really. Obviously, as you said, members can feed into the consultation further outside this meeting, but just lastly in this meeting, if there were any other proposals or any income generation of savings that you wanted to raise now, to raise it now before we finish this item. But if members haven't, then that's fine.
I see nothing. I suspect there may be people putting in proposals directly. So we'll wait on those. We'll get those at the outcome of the consultation. So therefore, if we move to the forward look, I'll go back to you, Charlotte, if you'd like to say a few words about that.
Yes, Chair, so the forward work programme is just for noting, as mentioned earlier in our briefing, the items that were meant to come today have been moved to the next meeting purely because we were having the main discussion on the budget today and an update on the services with the impacts of COVID-19. So that forward work programme reflects that for today. Thank you.
In that case, it leaves it to me, as there are no urgent items, to say thank you to all the staff involved and to our cabinet members for their additional input, and to members for some good questions. And I will see you all sometime in the future. That brings the meeting to a close. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Stay
Thank
safe.
you.
Thank you all. Bye.
Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you all. Thank you for everything you've done. Bye.